uh, recording the session, and I appreciate you guys so much being on today. And I apologize for last week. Yeah, we got stuck in the airport and traffic and all kinds of things, and it just wasn't even possible to happen last week. So we'll just pick up where we left off, and then for today, sorry that I was late to the meeting. We'll keep it right at 40 minutes. What happened? We went to get the vaccination, and we got there plenty of time early enough, but then it took, man, it was really backlogged. We waited a long time. We didn't count on it taking 2+ hours just to, we're supposed to zip in 15 minutes. And yeah, so anyway, but so I apologize to you guys. So glad you're here. Did you guys have a good day at church yesterday though? Did it go well?
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome, man. Great service.
Awesome.
Really
It did. I preached in Glendale, California yesterday.
You?
I was. Yeah,
I thought you were gone this
Glendale.
Wednesday for some reason. So you were actually gone, and you came back to. Are you in California still?
Yeah, I'm about 100 yards from the ocean.
Oh, hey
I
man!
just got out of the ocean about a half hour ago, boogie boarding.
Hey brother, I was doing that on Saturday. So
yeah, it's great.
It's a lot of fun. Well, so let's. I want to add something here on the chat session, and I know that you guys may not be able to access it right now, or maybe you can, but it'll be part of our discussion a little bit later in the meeting. And like I mentioned, I'm going to try to just keep putting resources on there that we can be watching and checking out. For today, we're looking at, it's really starting part 2 of the book, and it's the On the Map skill set. And so I don't know if I'm getting audio. I don't know if anything else in the room, but I'm hearing a lot of other audio. Are any of you guys?
I hear it. I don't know where it's coming from.
It's coming from the Pacific Coast Highway. I'm outside.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's cool. Well, we
Sorry.
love that. No. We're glad to have you on. So this chapter 4 is really about competence and credibility. And I think in the overall flow of the book, he's going to talk about how we have to be competent in all of our training. That's sort of an understanding. I think for pastors, it's just understood that people expect us to have competency. They sort of look to us to be trained, and I don't know, in a sense, to be resident theologians, to make sure that the ship is right and it's moving in a good direction. And there's a certain amount of that is just, it's understood. And then what he's going to do, though, and this later on in the book, he'll talk about what do you do when, the competency piece really has nothing to do with it, because they didn't train you how to do this in Bible college, and now all of a sudden you're off, into uncharted territory. What do you do then? But I'd like to just kind of keep the same pattern. If we could, each one of us to just say one thing, if you have it, one thing that really touched you about this chapter. And I want to start us off by just looking at page 58 in your book. If you don't, it's fine. But I loved this comment when he says being a leader is the difference between Johnny Appleseed and an apple farmer. In other words,
that was good.
Describe, the farmer has to attend to both seeds and soil, and indeed even more than the soil. And so I think a lot of times that old joke about the to be a preacher must be so easy, because all you do is get together 3 hymns and then get your sermon together, and that's just a story and 2 points, and then the rest of the time you just fish the rest of the week, because that's all preachers do. But the truth is, I mean, ministry of the word and the actual worship service is one component of a really complex system. So some people might think, well, all you do to plant apple seeds, you just throw the seed in the ground and just grow your apples. But the farmer is thinking about, we need the right kind of soil. We're going to have to have a good amount of sunlight, proper water, nutrition in that soil. Not only that, we've got to have silos or, barns, or we've got to repair a fenceway along that one area. I mean, there's so many different layers. And I really think that is sort of how it is as a pastor, because many times this has happened to me, where someone has made a request possibly, or they had a wish, and it seemed like just a really simple thing, right? But in my mind, and I don't say this to them, but what it triggers in my mind is that, man, if we do that, then that sets this other thing into motion. And then how does that impact so-and-so? And what about that? And there's so many layers to it. So, I think he's right on, that competency does have to do with being able to keep a lot of plates spinning at the same time. But I loved his analysis there, and I love where it goes. The root word for organizational, the next page, is the same word for organic. The root word for organizational, same word for organic. And I think that God's church is more an organism than it is an organization. It is an organization, but it is an organism too, and it's living. It's something that is vital and alive, and so
Wait, I have 3 water.
so I really enjoyed that. So just, hey guys, is there anything about this chapter this week that spoke to your heart in a special way? Anything that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Man, there were several things, but like the very first story about the family that was willing to go from Ohio to Alaska with 3 daughters to know electricity, running water, and so they asked him, how did you accomplish it? And he's like, well, if you have someone to advise you and show you a few tricks along the way, it's not that big a deal.
Wow.
And then so I thought that was pretty cool, because I think the theme is, if how are they, I may be getting it wrong, but how are they going to follow you off the map if they don't basically trust you on the map? So it's kind of a powerful statement, but then felling our way to God's plan A. That kind of stuck out to me too, because it's on page 59. Todd, I believe that our plan A is never God's plan A, and we only get to God's plan A when our plan A, B, and C fail. So you need to fail as soon as you can, so we can learn quickly as possible. And that whole, if you get a chance to refresh yourself on that was pretty interesting to me. I thought, because I think sometimes we think, oh man, this is it. I've got it, and then I personally, I will fail, and then I'll be like, oh Lord, really? And then I'm like, yep, Lord, your way was right way all along. So I don't know.
So good.
Just being adaptable,
And I think that's it. You are onto something there, Mo, because failing often is just part of the journey. You try things and it sometimes it just succeeds and you go, wow, that worked. And sometimes it doesn't work, and you're like, okay, I've got something I can learn from that. And there's been probably 1 or 4 of those in my experience, and there have been the other.
But it's a very good chapter.
Yeah. So Oliver, anything you could share with us?
Yeah, I'm gonna show you something real quick. If you can zoom in, you'll see on my book, everything is underlined in red right there. That's the same story of Johnny Appleseed and the farmer.
Yeah.
That's what stood
Yeah.
out to me the most.
That's
I'm,
something.
raised up in the Midwest, Michigan. I'm very familiar with Johnny Appleseed, the story of that. And ministry is a lot like that. I mean, if we
Uh-huh.
just toss out the seeds and say, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be," you'll end up with nothing. You've got to be able to strategically plan. What things you mentioned, about the farming, how to cultivate and such, but you've also got to remember how many seeds that you can't sell. I mean, you can't sell those apples because you got to replant those seeds. And
Right.
a visionary looks at that. A leader will look at that and say, not just what are our needs today, what are our needs 5 years from now? What are our needs 10 years from now? What do we look like a year from now? And that's the difference between a farmer and Johnny Appleseed. He sees in the future.
Mm. Oh, that's excellent. This last week at the General Council, and it was so good. One of the speakers, I'm trying to remember his name, JJ, can't call his last name, pastors in Orlando, and really incredible speaker. But he was making a comparison of trees in the Bible and had imagery on the screen of beautiful, luscious, large trees. And then he had one for a prop that he used for certain things. And but he was mentioning that you want to see the thing that produced this luscious tree, and he picks up a little seed, and my mind raced back to when we had Micah Smith with us, a missionary, and he brought me up on the stage, and Micah cut an apple in two. Well, before he did that, he said, "How many apples do I hold in my hand?" One. And then he says, "You can tell me how many apples are here, but can you tell me how many apples are on the inside? Like you can look at a tree and say, well, there's so many apples on it, but can you look at one apple and see how many apple trees are inside there?" And so he opened it up and brought the seeds out, and man, powerful imagery. So we don't truly ever know how when we plant something, it's God who waters, it's God who gives the increase. Paul said, one plants, one waters, but God brings the increase. So
That's so true.
I really, really enjoyed this chapter. I thought it was very good. And any other observations before we move to another area of discussion about it?
I'd like to piggyback that story you just said about the one plants, one waters, another sees the increase. Maybe you know the story, maybe you don't. But when I was in A school for the Navy back in the 80s, there was this guy named Kenny I'd always minister to, and he would go to church once in a while with me or Wednesday night service, but he would never give his heart to Christ. And I loved this kid so much. He was a good kid, and I always wondered why he wouldn't, just make that commitment. And but I was faithful, to church, going and this, that, and the other. Anyways, I got to my ship, the Enterprise, and I received a package of letters because they follow you all around wherever you're stationed. And I got a letter from the Baptist pastor out there. He said the Sunday you left, or the Thursday you left, that next Sunday, Kenny gave his heart to Christ.
Oh,
He said he realized everything you told him was true at that point. And it reminds me, one man waters, another plants, another waters, but another sees the increase. But we're all one team.
yes, so
Amen.
good. I wanted to put this on the on my camera. I'm not getting a really good image of
Oh, I
it.
see it.
If any of you are watching this recording later on, we're talking about these three different areas on this Venn diagram, and how they intersect. And really, competence is just one of the areas, but we're talking about contextual skills, organizational value, consistent delivery, developed through assessment. So I think that we as a church, we've always got to make sure that we're doing the best that we can do with the skill set that God has given us. And that's just one component of it. And then, of course, we'll move to other areas. I'd like to use the remainder of our time. Oh, go
Can
ahead,
I say one
Oliver.
thing? You said something very important, doing the best that we can do. A
Mhm.
lot of times we compare ourselves to other churches that have a lot more finances maybe, or bigger, more resources, and we try to do the best that they can do with the resources we have. But if we got to be content where we're at and see the growth, even if it's in baby steps, and not compare ourselves to others.
Oh, and it's
It's
so
very important.
easy to get caught up in the comparison game without even trying to. I think 33 years in ministry has given me a perspective that some ministries that have exploded in growth have remained steady and consistent and life-giving and vital through decades now. But some of them, you sort of think, oh, I wonder whatever happened. And you kind of investigate and you realize, oh man, that thing fell to pieces. And then I really enjoyed several of the comments this last week about our movement, the Assemblies of God, how many percentage number hovers around 65, 67%. Don't quote me, that may not be correct, but I think that's what they said. The numbers of churches in our fellowship that are 200 or smaller. Well, that's certainly our category. That's 2/3 of all AG churches are in that category. We happen to live in a community that's exploding in growth. We hope to grow, we anticipate to grow, and we are growing at a slow and just steady pace. I'd love for it to be more explosive. But the ones that are amazing to me are the pastors of small churches in small communities that have been so faithful and so committed. And maybe for them to have 50 people is a huge percentage of their city, and
Exactly.
so success has all kinds of different, it looks like different things. And so that, to me, you're so right on. Man, let's be the best that we can be at who we are, and ask God to help us along the way. Yeah, and sort of along those lines, the link that I added into the chat session here. And by the way, if you're watching the recordings, all of the links for videos or for articles or things like that will be attached underneath the video session. So if someone comes to watch it, they'll be able to see it. But this is an interesting article, and I think it's something that is incredibly an important topic for me, for us as a church family. And I tell you what, before we get to that, let me just back up and say, and Mo, I know that you haven't been able to see the video from last time when we met. You weren't able to be with us, but it hasn't been posted yet, but it will be. But just a recursor, just sort of to recap, the things that I said were, we know that we need a volunteer on-ramp. That's the word I used, a volunteer on-ramp, so that people can get on and volunteer in different directions and different ways, and for it to be seamless and easy for that to happen. And 2, we need a leadership pipeline. That's a way to develop for people to get involved. If they aspire to leadership in different levels, we need them, so we want to develop that. And then the third thing that I said last time was some kind of a communication that's consistent and steady and across the board. And one component of that is something that I'm working on, a podcast called Tin Can Telephone, and it will just be all things related to church life. It might be training on an area, or it might be interviewing someone who does certain things in the church. It could be any number of things. And as I was reflecting on that, I think really communication is definitely a part of it, but maybe that's not the right word that I would have chosen, because what I'm really thinking is that we need to integrate, that's the word, integrate continually, consistently, over and above board, just over and above and beyond anything that's expected. And admittedly, we do not do that right now. We've done better at communicating in the past. I think at one point in our church life, communication looked more like police officers on the radios checking in and talking back and forth. We are not that way right now. We have meetings, they're scheduled. We keep most of them, some of them we don't. We try to keep everybody posted. Well, this meeting got canceled or that got canceled. But I know that the churches that are really being successful coming out of COVID are doing way better than I have led on integration. And it's things like, here's our daily devotion. People go online, they're like, oh, here's a 5-minute devotion from one of our pastors today. Every day. Here's some prayer needs that are presented, or just ways to be connected. Text service we're good at, but we could be better. Phone calls, like real true phone calls. Hey, just calling to check in. How you doing? You know, and there's probably not enough time in the day, but integration. So let me just review that. Leadership pipeline, volunteer on-ramp, integrated communication. But then this thing that I'd like to spend some time talking about the rest of our time. And Oliver, I don't mean anything by this, but I just muted you just so that we don't get the behind the scenes sound on the recording. But I mean, when you're ready to jump in, just give it a thumbs up, or however you do it. We can definitely. But this is an article that I read, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it up and make reference to it. But it's about, I don't know if you guys know Mark Driscoll, who was the founding pastor of Mars Hill Church, and it was in Seattle area. Mark Driscoll's phenomenal, charismatic leader. Mars Hill, the name from Athens, the book of Acts, I think it's 17, where they met at Mars Hill, and the integration and learning and everything that happened there. Regrettably, Mark Driscoll was eventually asked by his church board, and this is not gossiping, I mean, this is common knowledge. This has been talked about in many, many circles. He was asked to step down by his church board because he had become very overhanded, very authoritarian. There was little accountability and a real sort of, some would say, mean-spirited approach to ministry. And I mean, that church was going and blowing. He was really traveling around the nation and the world, speaking in conferences, speaking, writing books, all kinds of things. So that happened, and that was a really, I'm sure, very painful thing to go through. But then he was asked by the board to step down, but the way it was worded was, if you would take 2 years and go through some rehabilitation, we still value you as a pastor. We think that it could work. Well, he did not agree to that. He said, who are you to tell me to do that? And went on his own, came here and founded the Trinity Church in Scottsdale. Goodness, I do not know how many years ago it happened. I want to say 5 years ago, I think maybe around 2016. Again, he's just such a charismatic leader, very strong. The congregation runs about 2,000. And but this article that you'll read is the perception of some from inside the church who, their perspective, and there's been a lot of, again, just in more recent months, some really dogmatic decision-making, sort of mean-spirited, and this is, it's the highway or my way or the highway sort of an approach. And I mean, it even involves him having a security team. One of the guys on the board has his own private investment firm, and so the story is about a 17-year-old boy, 17 and 15-year-old son's family went there. They're both gifted. The two boys got involved with a worship band. 17-year-old and one of Mark Driscoll's daughters began being interested in one another. He called the father and the son into a private meeting in his office and said, "These are the rules, absolutely no kissing," laid it out. Well, the son and the pastor's daughter did kiss, and the outfall of that was that in the middle of the worship practice, the senior executive pastor came and got him off the stage, took him upstairs, locked him in his office, locked door with security there, and really read him the riot act, and just told him to leave the building now. And he was escorted out of the building into the parking lot, and the dad's outside saying, "What's going on? What happened?" And suddenly there's half dozen security team around the car saying that you got to go and you're not welcome back here. And it just turned into this huge deal. And so the short of it is that this family, by all counts, was just belittled and spoken down to, and maybe there's truth and error on both sides of it. I'm not the one. I don't know, but the interesting thing that came out of all of that was, as members are angry and they're picking and choosing different. Who's going to be on this side? Who's on that side? Who supports a pastor? Who supports this other family? The interesting thing that came out about it was that in the days following this, then Mark sat down with the leadership of the church and ranked everyone on their loyalty from 1 to 10. 10 was superior, 1 was the pits. Nobody got a 10. Well, a couple of people got a 9, but one person got an 8 because they had been in a photograph online with somebody that he didn't trust. So they were lowered down on the, and it just went down, down, down. And so eventually, it just became really, really bad. Let's see, Oliver. How do I unmute you? I guess I can't. Can you unmute yourself? Do you see that as a choice? So sorry. Wow. Talk about not being tech savvy. I can't find it. If you can find unmute, let's see, unmute all. Did I see that somewhere? Oh, goodness. I've got you muted and I don't know how to.
Got me?
There we go. There we go. All right.
I was simply going to mention, not only a church, but when any business starts ranking people like that, it's the beginning of the end for that business. That's not the way to build loyalty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And so anyway, what came out from that was that one of the people on the lead team said, "This is ridiculous, and I'm also out," and then uncovered a lot of things. And so one of them was, and we're going to be out of time in 10 minutes, so the timer's going there. One of the things was that the church board, there's no church board. What they're finding out is there's no constitution and bylaws. There's no financial reports. There's never any indication of how much money comes in or not. Nobody knows the salaries of anyone except for the top guy. And so all of that to say, in addition to the other 3 things, when I'm talking about leadership pipeline, volunteer on-ramp, communication, in addition to that, as we start setting up the idea of multiple locations, we have got to be really clear on who has what authority and in what way. And I don't have that yet, but I just have the realization that, oh my goodness, it can go horribly wrong if you don't spell it all out ahead of time. I know of a church in Roswell, New Mexico, same thing. Something similar happened, and pulled their church out of the Assemblies of God and became independent, and did away with Constitution, and eventually it just collapsed. God has recovered that church and brought it back, and they're in a season of healing now. But it can go horribly wrong, if we don't plan properly.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, hi Mo. Sorry, go. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry I've dropped out for a minute. So did that happen in Arizona or did that happen in Seattle? The Mars Hills thing?
Now that happened here, happened
Okay.
in May, and let me just tell you how bad it was.
Well, I think I caught most of it. I just didn't know. I didn't know where because I kind of cut out in the middle.
Sure.
It sounded really bad. I know we're short on time. I was just gonna say, I think that there needs to be, kind of a chain of command. I feel like it would be good, to let your pastors know up front, hey, this is, I trust you, and but anything major, I think definitely needs to be brought to you. So that's just my thoughts on it. So.
And that lines up with my spirit, what I'm feeling too. I do want you guys to know what I'm picturing is for each location to be like when let's just use the model that we've described. So if Oliver ends up being the first one we send out, I'm really looking to Oliver to be the campus pastor of that site, and to really just dig in and be so, to pastor those people, to do hospital visits, to do phone calls, follow up, try to assimilate guests, to be just starving, hungry to grow that church, just because it will only benefit you guys as that happens. And so I think from my point, I'm going to be pointing the people of whether it's, let's say it's Verado, the Verado gang, I'm pointing them continually back. This is Pastor Oliver, this is your pastor. But we do have that leverage strength of connectivity. Why would we have it without really using it? And so I want to be as involved as possible and find those ways of maybe I'm not the on-site guy Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, but from time to time I do want to be in there, and I want people from day one to feel that connectivity among the different churches, and that's for the foreseeable future. I mean, do we ever at a point in the future say, okay, Verado, man, you guys are doing so great. You know what? You need to just have your own fellowship, your own church. Why, we would cross that bridge when we come to it. But for the foreseeable future, I just see this one church, multiple locations approach. And I think I hear you saying that too, Mo. And Oliver, one of the things that came up in the board meeting that I thought was so good is that we talked about how, so my feeling was that we need to make sure that money that's given, say at Verado, remains with Verado. But you brought up the very good point, yes, but also there needs to be a sense of that if we all don't succeed, then none of us succeed, and the loyalty to our hub, and that, so we need to tool all that out, what that looks like,
That's
how
true.
that happens.
I think we got to not look at it as one hub with just 5 churches. We need to look at it as one church with 5 rooms.
There
We're
you
the
go.
same church. We need to have unity of vision, and we all need to work together in that unity. None of us can be an island to ourselves, because the whole thing will fall apart. It will fall
Amen.
apart.
You guys will enjoy this article. It's interesting reading. It's drama, but it's also enlightening. And one of the things that I couldn't believe, they actually sent the security team on 24/7 surveillance of this family round the clock. And you can see all the data from their text on Easter Sunday. While part of the text back and forth was, wow, this is the biggest Easter yet, right? Oh yeah, bigger than any other. But then also, subject was seen to go down Camelback Road. Follow them, make sure that you know where they're going. Can't tell who it is from the dark shaded windows. Oh, negative. It turned out that wasn't them. Head back to the house. Make sure you keep an eye on them. So it was all this kind of stuff. And the funniest part to me was they've headed down Happy Valley Road. They're turning on Cave Creek. They have just pulled into Dream City Church parking lot. I'm like, are you kidding? Like that they really were doing this. So anyway, it is funny
Wow.
how we can get so caught up in stuff and forget the true meaning, the pure meaning of the gospel and what we're really all about. And
Amen.
never sell out for loyalty to an individual over our
Right.
loyalty to him.
I read next week's chapter already, chapter 5 about Lewis and Clark. A lot of the things you're talking about are in that chapter 5.
Yeah.
How that when they got together, one was higher ranked than the other, but he never let anyone show that. Clark came in as a lieutenant. Meriwether was a captain, but he treated him as a captain. And because of that, everyone thought there was two captains, but they had unity of vision. And that was, I don't want to jump ahead, but a lot of what you're saying is in that next chapter.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, because and I love that they define from their viewpoint, when they look at us, it's just one team. Just, identical to what you're saying. And that's my heart. I think in order for us to be successful, there has to be a lot of give and take for all of us. But man, we're just committed to this. We got the same values, the same heart, same dream, same vision. I'm starting a book called The Imperfect Pastor. And I thought it's interesting. What really grabs my eye on the
Are you reading my autobiography?
No, it would be about me, not you. On the outside of the cover, it says, I'm perfect. And then it has like an editor's red ink, has circled the apostrophe and then connected the rest and says imperfect, not I'm perfect, but imperfect pastor. The very first sentence is something like, years ago, God tempted, or the devil was tempted by the thought, I will be like God. And he used that same tactic on me, and I, the fool, fell for it. And I believed that I could be a God. And this,
Wow.
Didn't you do a sermon series on this about 3 years ago? I think you did. Because I remember the play on that. I'm perfect and imperfect.
I'm just picking up the book for the first time today, but maybe I did.
I thought you did a sermon series on that.
I have forgotten way more than I've learned through the years. So, well, I love you guys and appreciate you so much. And looks like we're under 1 minute. Mo, any parting shots?
Yeah, real quick. I'm watching a show called Alone. And I don't know if you're familiar with that in history, but they have to get their own food. They're all alone out in the middle of nowhere. 3 of the guys have been fishing. They can't fish. The one guy that could get to the fish made